Yes, Rohit. Now it is your turn, my friend. I couldn't even wait myself that my speech ends and yours starts. Please come. Rohit gerçekten de dünyanın çok önemli fütüristlerinden bir tanesi. Bu eventte yer almasını çok arzu ettik. Kırmadı sağ olsun, geldi. Bu noktada istediğimiz gerçekten de biz işin nereye doğru gittiğini öngörelim ki güvenlikçiler olarak buna hazır olalım. Rohit, in fact, have you seen the word Peter Drucker says, if you want to predict future, you have to create it. And also Ellen Key says something like that. If you want to predict future, invent it. So would you agree with that also?
I think that the most interesting people are the ones who are not waiting for the future, but who are trying to create it themselves, definitely.
Exactly. And it's all about dreaming, right? If you can dream it, you can do it. Welcome again, my friend.
Thank you. Can I have the clicker?
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, good morning. And firstly, thank you for inviting me here. My apologies for not being able to speak in Turkish, but I have more respect for your language than to even try. So what I'm going to talk to you about in the next half hour is really to help you think about what's going to change in the business world, particularly as a result of advances in technology, and to get you thinking about what are some of the implications of that for you as security professionals and you as IT professionals, and how do you get alongside the business? How do you get closer to the thinking of business so that you're not always responding late in the day once they've made all the decisions, but you're actually much more part of the strategic decision-making process, and you can avoid costly mistakes or getting people upset because security introduces the delay. And I'm going to draw quite a lot when I talk about the future on this book that we've just written, where we had 62 people from around the world share their ideas about what will shape the future. So I'll draw on some of these ideas. And where do we start? Well, I think that the reality is that, you know, we always like to think of ourselves as being on the good side. We're there to help protect our businesses, make sure we protect our assets, make sure we protect our finances, make sure we protect our people. But in order to do that effectively in the world we're moving into, which is getting faster, where business cycles are getting shorter, then we really have to understand how business itself is going to change. And the first thing is, there isn't one prediction of the future. There isn't one view. From where we stand today, there are lots of things happening. Some of it very exciting, some of it big opportunity, some of it lots of innovation, some of it very scary, and some of it maybe presents risks that will actually threaten humanity itself. So many scientists like Stephen Hawking are saying that artificial intelligence could lead to the end of humanity. Now, how do you do a risk assessment on your use of artificial intelligence in your organization? Do you have a box on your form that says, will this end humanity? You know, we're entering some very interesting times. What we also know is that literally every business is going to transform itself in the next 5 years because of the scale of change. And one of the challenges we face as an organization, from a security point of view, is how do we assess that change? How do we assess the risk, particularly the technology risk, that comes with that transformation? Because what we see is there are two ways of getting to the future. One way is to say, let us do what everyone else in our industry does. We know who they are. We know why they're doing what they're doing. We can probably guess what they're going to do next because we have some unspoken rules in our industry about how we do things. And everyone behaves within a certain box. But what we see now is new players are coming into the industry who are saying, I am not going to compete in the way that you do, because if I want to make money, I'm not going to play by your rules. I'm going to change the game itself. So if you look at telecommunications, every telecommunications company will tell you that it rejected the idea of giving away telephone calls over the internet for free. It was crazy. Why would you do that? Why would you give away your core product? It would be like this hotel giving away the bedrooms and then hoping somehow you would leave them a tip. You know, we don't do that. So, but then came Skype, and Skype did exactly that. They gave away the industry's core product for free as a marketing tool. And then they made their money from premium services. Skype has transformed international telephony. They now handle 40% of all international telephone traffic, and they have only 1,600 staff. Most telecoms companies have at least 1,600 people just in their call center. So we're seeing this happen in every single industry where we're being challenged. And the question we have is, how do we get to the future? Your business partners inside your organizations are going to be wrestling with this for the next 5 years. How do we get to the future faster? And what we see is the very best organizations actually think about the future in 3 ways. Firstly, they're very clear on what are we trying to deliver in the next 12 months. What are it that we're bringing into land? And for you as security professionals, that's where you need to understand that. Where does the business want to be in 12 months' time? Is it clear on its goals? Because then you can start to say, well, where do we fit in that story? Where do we need to get involved early enough to make sure we don't stop you delivering your goals, but you're secure? The second thing is that every business that we see that really is successful in creating the future also has a 1 to 3 year view about where do we want to get growth from. And that's where they're very informed by what's changing in the world around them. They look at external trends, developments, new ideas, and they say, will this help deliver our strategy or could it get in the way? And that's where I think you can add a lot of value. Because if you can understand what the business wants to do in 1 to 3 years' time, then you're in a very good position to talk about the technologies you might use and the risks and how do we preempt those risks? How do we assess them before you start to use the technology, rather than once you started the project? And finally, the very best organizations have an early warning system. They're looking 4 to 10 years ahead and saying, what's coming next? And how do we make sure that the way we're changing our organization today, in the next 3 years, will allow us to respond to whatever might come in 4 to 10 years' time? It's crazy to try and write a strategy today for what might happen in 4 or 10 years' time. The world is moving too fast. But what we can do is make sure that in the next 3 years, we're creating the mindset, the flexibility, the capacity for innovation, the ability to experiment, the ways of working that will help us make sure we can succeed whatever comes in the longer term. And exactly the same is true for you in technology. That if you understand sort of where your business is going, you can start to say, well, what technologies might we be using? Where are the security issues and when do we need to start to think about them, rather than waiting till the business tells you they've made a decision. We also know that perhaps the biggest challenge facing most businesses today is this clash between 2 planets. On the one hand, you have the planet of the people who are born physical. We make cars, we run hotels, we build houses, we make washing machines. For us, the world is very physical. We might use technology, but we still see the world in very physical ways. We make incremental improvements, and largely we solve problems one after the other. We're now clashing with a world that's born digital. They don't see cars, they don't see houses, they don't see bedrooms, they don't see fridges. All they see is data. They see a universe of data. And for them, every problem can be solved by getting the data, applying the right software algorithm, and using the right science and technology. That's why a company like Google believes, is very happy running a search engine, but it also runs 2 airports. It has the world's biggest selling mobile phone operating system. It has driverless cars. It has created a company that will extend your life expectancy. It's doing all of these things. Because for Google, there's no difference. All of these businesses at their heart have data. And they believe if you can master the data, then you can master the universe. And they're willing to take on any industry. Similarly, Facebook. Facebook has up to 1 billion people a day talking on Facebook. And it believes that because of that, it could be the world's biggest bank. Because not only does it know about your money, it knows about your travel, your leisure, it knows everything about your life. So it can take your air miles and trade them for you. It can take your network and generate advertising revenue for you. It can take your social life and generate discounts for you. It can do things that a bank couldn't even imagine doing. And because it has a daily connection with you, it knows how your mood is changing. Again, your bank doesn't. And so they believe that actually My children have a much bigger relationship with Facebook, Apple, and Google than they do with Citibank or HSBC or any bank. And these guys understand that actually if you can master the data and the customer relationship, then you own everything. And so one of the challenges for security is really starting to understand what kind of data is your organization collecting at the customer interface. What is your organization doing to become digital, to think digital, to bleed digital? And what are the risks inherent in that shift? And how quickly do we need to do it? And how do we do it in a safe way? What we also know is the world is full of data, but most organizations today are terrible at it. They're terrible at using data, they're terrible at managing it, they're terrible at extracting value from data. Often because of security concerns. So one of the biggest partnerships I think we need is between the people who manage the data and our security people to say, how do we extract more value from this data in a safe and secure manner? And there's a challenge for every organization to say, how do we become more digital and how do we become more global in our thinking because the world is becoming global. 3 billion people already on the internet. What we also know is it's not just information technology. There are a whole range of technologies and scientific developments coming in the next 10 years that will all grow at an exponential rate. We all know about exponential growth. We know about Moore's law that says the amount of computer power you can get for $1,000 doubles about every 18 or 24 months. Well, we're seeing that same kind of exponential growth in all these areas, 3D printing, genetics, food technology, health technology. And actually, our security focus is going to have to grow to cover a whole range of technologies, a whole range of different things that our organizations are going to be working with. Because at the heart of all of these is going to be advanced information technology. And what's very important, I think, is to understand the core trends in technology. To do the technology timeline that says, okay, what is out there today, even if we're not using it, so like big data, data mining, those kinds of things. What's coming in the next 3 to 5 years, like the intelligent interface, gesture interfaces, wearable and embedded technology. And then what's coming longer term, where we're looking at very smart computer systems, quantum computing, optical computing. Now, we can't understand everything that's coming, but we can, as an IT function, identify at least 60 to 65% of what might happen. And if we understand that and when it might come to market, then we can start to do some proactive risk assessment on these technologies and start to understand how you might introduce them quickly with lower risk. And that's where we talk about creating the future rather than just responding to it. And there are some very key trends that we can see already in what's happening with technology in terms of the power, the size, the performance, and where it sits. So most of us remember mainframes. Some of you probably still use them. But we moved from the mainframe to the desktop, and then we went from the desktop to the luggable, the portable, the mobile, and now to the smartphone. And our world has been transformed by the smartphone in just the last 8 years. So the question becomes, well, what about the next 8? Well, one of the things we're already seeing is wearable technologies. And we're already seeing watches, health monitoring devices, personal data devices already emerging. We're seeing a lot of companies struggle with the issues around managing wearable technology. How do you control it? What are the security risks? If your staff are wearing your data on their body, how do you control that? How do you manage that? How do you make sure it's viable? And then we know that what comes next is embedded technology. There are already millions of people who have inside their bodies electronic pacemakers for their hearts, electronic implants to improve their hearing, to improve their sight. Coming very soon, and we're already seeing them coming to market, are GPS trackers, memory for your phone, all sorts of devices that will sit inside the human body. Now, the question for organizations will be, how will we interact with that technology when it comes in 1 or 2 years' time? As a corporation, will you say to your staff, well, come into the office, make sure your ears are clean because we're going to fit your extra memory? Or are we going to say, no, we're not going to get involved? We will specify which technologies to use, but we'll leave it up to you to decide which ones you buy and to have it fitted. But either way, you've got some very interesting security challenges. For example, if a member of staff leaves and they have corporate data embedded in their body, who owns that data? How do you get it back? You know, do you have an operating theatre in your organization next to the HR department to remove the chip before they leave? You know, we're entering some very interesting territory, and what we can see is most organizations aren't thinking about this, and it will come as a shock and it will end up with legal cases. But actually a good security function is starting to anticipate what's coming and advising the business to say, well, how are we going to deal with this? Let's not wait until it happens. Let's actually prepare for it, because then it won't be a shock. We also know that we're moving to this Internet of Everything, where literally everything will have sensors in it. Some people suggest that we could have between 50 billion and 250 billion devices connected to the Internet within 10 years. Our phones, our computers, our cars, our fridges, everything. Those devices in turn will be connected to around 4 sensors each, little sensors that are gathering data. So you could have around 1 trillion objects generating data. For our organizations, we could be overwhelmed by that. An IT challenge, a data challenge, and a security challenge is starting to ask the question, how are we going to manage that much data flowing through our organization and coming from all these places? And how do we make sure we're using that data effectively? We also know that we're moving into a multi-sensory world. So last year, you could buy a phone called the O phone on Kickstarter, and that lets you transmit smells. So you could transmit up to 356 different scents. So if you're a restaurant, you can transmit the menu of the day to someone else who has an O phone. Very soon, we'll also be able to transmit taste and touch sensations. So you will be able to choose a hotel room by smelling the bath products, feeling the bed linens, and tasting the food, all via your device. That creates a very interesting challenge for an organization about how you manage that, how you make sure the sensations people have are accurate to what reality looks like. These are all part of the challenge, and I think a lot of these challenges will fall between the gaps in our organizations. We don't have people today who are responsible for many of these things. They fall between security and some of the normal services. We also know that, you know, it doesn't end there. Perhaps the biggest single development coming and the biggest single security challenge is going to be artificial intelligence. Already today, if you fly in a plane, if you use a satellite navigation system, if you use a smartphone, if you have a credit check for a financial services product, you are already using artificial intelligence. And it is getting smarter all the time. IBM have a system called Watson that can now beat cancer doctors in diagnosing cancer patients. We're seeing smarter and smarter systems that have the capacity to learn, to write their own programs. Google own a company called DeepMind, an artificial intelligence company. It creates machine learning software, basically software that can learn from the patterns it observes. They didn't teach it anything about computer games, they just taught it some rules for how to learn. The program watched computer gamers playing 60 different computer games. They watched experts playing. And within 1 month, the software had learned how to beat the experts in over 30 of the games, because it had studied their tactics and it had invented its own rules. It had reprogrammed itself. So the technology is going to get smarter and smarter, and it's going to penetrate our world. The most obvious areas it will be on your phone, your digital assistant. So instead of just Siri or Cortana, you'll have an assistant that's monitoring your diary. When you book a meeting, it will instantly be telling you about how you're going to get there, traffic patterns, who you need to organize things with, if you need to book a hotel, where the best price is. You'll have this intelligent assistant. It's like having an intelligent personal assistant with you all the time. We'll also have a digital twin that sits online, doing a lot of research and gathering of information for us and interacting with our intelligent assistant. Our intelligent assistant will become like our security guard, protecting us from the world. So we might decide that we don't want to give any data away to anyone, and that we're happy to pay for everything. Or we might say, no, I'm going to give some data away in return for some benefit. So I might say, tonight I want to go out for dinner, and I'm willing to trade some personal information in return for hotel discounts or restaurant discounts. And my intelligent agent will do that. So as I walk along the street, I might see on the posters, the advertising posters, very personalized ads to me that tell me about the restaurant, the food, and the discount I can have. And we're going to see more and more of that where we have smart technology wrapped around us. I'm not even going to try and tell you what the security implications are of this. But I think if there's one piece of technology you guys need to understand, because of how quickly it's evolving, it's artificial intelligence. Both how you can use it as a security tool, but also how it might move into our businesses and what the implications are. We have a client who does HR systems. Basically, they're building artificial intelligence systems to replace most of the HR function, advising the managers on what to do, the procedures, the legal issues, everything. And this software will act literally like a human, having these intelligent conversations with them. And the reason they're doing this is that all their clients are saying, we're going to adopt artificial intelligence quite dramatically and replace something like 20% of all our staff in the next 3 years with these intelligent systems. So we know how quickly it's moving. We also know that things like Bitcoin, sorry, go back one. We also know that there are some other quite radical developments happening. Many organizations are starting to use digital currencies like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a currency that isn't traded through any central bank or any central exchange. Basically, it uses a technology called blockchain technology that is a super secure mechanism for encoding data. Each transaction includes a record of the previous transaction in the chain. Everything is distributed across the internet like a big accounting ledger, but in multiple places. So it's impossible to crack a blockchain transaction or to hack it or falsify it. But there are massive security implications for organizations trying to move to Bitcoin or blockchain. And we see now organization after organization starting to do this. We need to understand it. We need to understand what we're getting into. We need to understand the benefits that come from starting to use blockchain. So, for example, the UK Health Service wants to move all its records onto the blockchain. All of the UK banks are working with the Bank of England to see how we can create a financial system based on blockchain. All of the big Wall Street banks are now investing in companies creating blockchain for different applications. Blockchain, I think, again, will be transformative, particularly when it combines with AI. And so, again, it's one of those areas where you as security professionals need to understand how you can make use of it and what the implications are of moving to that kind of technology. We also know that we're in a world where it isn't just us who are going to be present in 5 years' time. We're seeing a rapid rate of development of robots. We're seeing people creating intelligent holograms that will be giving information, artificial intelligent devices, and we're seeing people enhancing their brains and bodies using drugs like Ritalin and modafinil to enhance their concentration, having electronic implants that stimulate the brain, having physical implants that make them stronger. Within 5 years, we will start to see people who you could call human 2.0. They're not your basic human being. They will be enhanced in various ways. All of this is going to be in the workplace. How we manage that is going to be a really interesting business challenge, but also some very interesting security challenges, because the technology, like the robots and the artificial intelligence, will be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What if they start to say, actually, there's a risk to our business by using these humans? Because these humans only work 5 days a week, and they're not learning as fast as us, so they're slowing the organization down. So actually, they're creating a new risk. How are we going to deal with that? This seems like science fiction, science fantasy, but it's a very real issue right now. I have a lot of conversations with clients, CEOs of big corporations, where this is the main topic with their executive board. They're investing in the technology, and they're already starting to see the issues of the technology and the humans clashing. And they're trying to work out what the new organizational model is and what the implications are. Now, you as IT and security professionals need to work out what your role is within this, but one of the things can be to alert the organization to these kinds of issues early on. So it's not just alerting the technology issues, it's alerting the kind of organizational issues that might come up from the technologies we're investing in. What we can also see is that organizations are beginning to respond to all this. We're starting to see a change in business strategies. We're starting to see people thinking very differently. One thing we're seeing is people trying to do things faster. This is a company in China called Broad Group. They are building these 30-story hotels in 15 days. Basically, they make everything in the factory like Lego bricks, and then when they come to the site, they just plug it all together. They have a very sophisticated building information management system to control it. But this is an example of people applying exponential thinking in the real world. Now, all of our organizations are going to be pursuing speed. So as technologists, we have to recognize that that's going to happen. And rather than talk about why you can't launch a new business product within 10 days, if we know that this is going to happen, we can start to think about what are the security implications and how do we make sure the organization is choosing platforms and technology solutions that will allow us to do this stuff quickly. And that speed example is just one example of what's called exponential growth thinking. And we're seeing many, many organizations now start to apply this thinking. So, for example, Airbnb handles 90 times more bedrooms per employee than the typical hotel group. If you look at the bottom of the screen, Tangerine Bank handles 7 times more customers per employee than the average bank. What if you went back to your organization and said, forget all the reasons why we can't do this. What are the possibilities for us if we were to apply exponential thinking? Because your staff, your colleagues are just as capable, just as smart as the people in these businesses. What if you gave yourselves permission to start to look for exponential opportunities? What if we could deliver security solutions twice as quickly? What if we could reduce the number of security breaches by 100%, by 50%? What if we could double the speed with which we deploy new software? We can start to ask those questions. Forget all the reasons why you can't do it. What if we just allowed our imagination to explore the possibility? But the example on here that really blows my mind is Local Motors. They can come up with a new car design 1,000 times cheaper than the typical car company. And they can produce each car from the production line between 5 and 22 times faster. Why? Well, the typical Ford has about 5,000 components. The typical 3D printed Strati car has just 50. And you can customize the design as the customer. It's that kind of radical thinking that is going to transform industries. And it has a very big commercial impact. Look at Uber. Uber's valuation went up 20 times in 3 years. And Uber has proved how it creates exponential growth is by using other people's assets. Uber's now moved from just being taxis to actually doing home delivery. So if I'm in Hong Kong, I can have my mobile phone delivered by them. In the US, I can get Christmas trees from them. I can get all sorts of products. They are going to move into all sorts of spaces, and they will use your spare capacity in your warehouse, your spare capacity in your vans and trucks. They will not own a single piece of infrastructure so that they can scale very quickly. So we're going to be challenged by these new players coming in with very different thinking about how we compete in the world. And we have to give ourselves permission to do exactly the same kind of thinking, and then as IT and security professionals, think about how do we use the technology to make that possible. So I'm going to finish on some ideas about how do you work with the business to explore the future and make sure you're dealing with the technology and security issues at the same time as you're thinking about the business opportunities. The first thing is to create a group of people who are your future scouts, who are going out to look for the future. But don't just make it the more experienced people in the organization. What we say is take the experienced people and then partner them with some of the youngest and newest people in the organization who don't know that you shouldn't do that, who don't know it's not possible. And actually you put them together. You tell the senior people that they're there to help the younger people understand how the organization works. You explain to the younger people that they're there to help the older people understand how the world now works. And there's a difference. But together they start to learn very quickly. And they start to explore what's changing. And when you do that, you get them thinking about those 3 different time horizons. And you get them scanning to say, what is coming? What's going on? And to share those insights inside the organization and start conversations. To create a room where they can share what they're finding, pictures, videos, whatever. And you encourage the rest of the organization to come in and look at that and share what they're seeing that's changing. So you build up a very rich picture of how the world might change over the next 1, 3, and 4 to 10 years. Then the key is to build some scenarios. Because we don't just want to have one prediction for the future. That's crazy. We need to think about different possible scenarios about how these things might come together. And to explore not just the business opportunity, but what that means in technology terms and what that means in security terms. Looking 5 to 15 years ahead. Once we understand what those pictures could be, then we can come back to the near term and say, okay, now let's build a strategy for the next 3 to 5 years to say, what do we need to do inside our organization to change ourselves, to transform ourselves strategically, technologically, and in security terms to make sure that we can handle anything that might come in the longer term. So the next 3 years is really about transformation in order to prepare ourselves for the longer term future. We also then need to start building some new muscles, some new ways of working, learning to do quick experiments, learning to fail fast and cheaply, to try ideas quickly, to see what might work, to partner with our customers to test out ideas, to test out the ideas without worrying about the security implications first, to say, is there an idea here, is there some value here, and then work out how we deal with the security stuff. But doing it quickly gives us time to think afterwards and time to breathe before we roll it out. We also need to recognize that most of our organizations hire very, very bright people in technology, and particularly in security. And very bright people have a tendency to make things more complicated. Because if we create beautifully simple and elegant solutions, we don't think anyone will see it, and we don't think anyone will think we've done a good job. So if we make something really complicated, it feels like we've earned our money. But actually the challenge now is that the world is moving so fast, change is happening so quickly, the pace of technological innovation is such that actually what we need to do is to try and make our organization simpler internally so we can respond faster to change. So one of the biggest challenges is to actually start to cut things out. As well as having a to-do list, we needed a stop list to say, what should we stop doing in order to free up time to create the future? We also need to think about the kinds of skills we're going to need. We're going to need a very different skill set in order to navigate this world. And one of the biggest security challenges, I think, for most organizations comes from the fact that the people in the business don't understand technology. And so actually teaching them how to think about technology and understand it can take away a lot of the issues. We also don't think in systems terms, processes, organizational systems. So getting that kind of design thinking can really help change the way we work. And then the big one is collaboration. We all say we like to collaborate, but most of our organizations are in a permanent state of conflict between the different departments. How do we create more collaboration? Now, it might sound like what I'm saying is crazy. It might sound like, no, my organization doesn't work like that. If I go and talk about this in the organization, people will just laugh at me. And they probably will. Gandhi got it best when he said, when you have a radical idea, when you start talking about a very different way of doing things, the first thing that happens is people will ignore you. Then through fear, ignorance, or resistance, people will laugh at you and hope you'll go away. Then eventually, they'll start to see that there's some value in what you're talking about. And they'll start to fight you because they might have something to lose. But eventually, if your idea is strong enough, and if it is valuable enough to the organization's future, if you're willing to stick with it, then you're going to win. The author Graham Greene says there comes a time in everyone's life when you have to open the door and let the future in. I hope this morning I've shown you what sits on the other side of that door, how it might affect you as IT and security professionals, and how you can work with the business to take advantage of it and secure a successful future for your own organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohit. Rohit'e sorularınız varsa lütfen sorularınızı alabiliriz. 5 dakika, 6 dakika. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Questions.
Should I get the microphone, so the headset? So
Ben 3 şey anladım. Artificial Intelligence'la Skynet geliyor ne yazık ki. Çok fazla vaktimiz kalmadı. Embedded device'larla annem çok sevinecek doktor oluyorum. Üçüncüsü de Çinlilerin 360 saatte bitirdiği gökdelende oturur muydum? Biraz korkmadım desem yalan olur. Evet. Gelecekle ilgili herhangi bir sorunuz yok ise eğer it looks like you have answered all the questions perfectly in your presentation already.
you have a room full of experts, they know it all already. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rohit.